Hi, welcome to week 5. I've enjoyed watching and participating in your discussion about how to use the various tools for exegesis and interpretation and application that we talked about last week. And today we're going to try to take those tools and use them in a very specific project that I had for you. Because this week, instead of having a group discussion, we're going to do group projects using wikis. Now, wiki, W-I-K-I, stands for What I Know Is, and is an online collaborative tool that allows members of a group to add text and links toward the development of a series of documents created by that group. And the purpose of this week's use of wikis is to give you an opportunity to practice and use all the tools for biblical exegesis, interpretation, and analysis that we've been talking about, and do it with the help of others. In each group, there are people who have had some experience doing this kind of analysis to help those of you who may have less exposure and less experience doing this kind of Bible study. Now, you're going to want to use all the resources that are available to you. Various translations of the Bible, commentaries, Bible dictionaries, lexicons, Bible handbooks, and so on. And I've also provided some links to some of the better online tools in a folder entitled Biblical Study Resources, which can be found in the Course Documents section of the Blackboard site. And I've also provided you a link on the announcement page to a brief tutorial on how to use wikis. And my hope is that by working together, you'll get a better idea how to use the various tools that we've talked about last week and we've learned in the book How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. And you want to make sure you make your contribution to the wiki, and when you do, and you use a particular resource, like a particular commentary or handbook, that you let others in the group know where you got it. And that's why I provided also a page for you to list resources, so that we all can get the benefit of your resources and your expertise. Now, we've been talking a lot about the Bible, but the Bible ultimately is to be used. And so that's what this is all about. It's actually now digging in and getting to use the Bible in a very concrete way. Now, to show you how valuable this process of biblical analysis can be, I want to talk briefly about a passage which is often misunderstood and misinterpreted because of that this process that we've been talking about is not followed. The passage is found in Luke chapter 18, verses 15 to 17. And it's a passage that is often referred to at infant baptisms and on Children's Sundays and other days when we're talking about ministry to children. And usually this passage is used to highlight God's love for children because of their innocence. But I think through exegesis, we learned that that was not the intent of Jesus at all. So let me read the passage. Luke chapter 18, verses 15 to 17. It says, "People were also bringing babies to Jesus to have him touch them." You can see the connection here to baptism. "When the disciples saw this, they rebuked them." That doesn't happen to many churches. "But Jesus called the children to him and said, 'Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. I tell you the truth, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it.' Anyone who does not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." Now, I'm not going to go through all the steps of exegesis, but from a literary standpoint, Luke is the gospel, which means this is a special kind of literature designed to highlight the actions and teachings of the man Jesus. And in this particular gospel, the story occurs as Jesus is on his way from Galilee, where he has spent most of his time, to Jerusalem, shortly before he's going to enter the city on the day that we often refer as Palm Sunday, which begins the week of his last days here on earth. And as such, Jesus is setting the stage for his confrontation with the rulers of the religious establishment, the Sadducees and Pharisees, and a confrontation with the Roman authorities headed by the governor Pontius Pilate. Now, one of the keys to understanding this passage is found in the social and cultural analysis of this time. We need to recognize that between the religious and political leaders, they pretty much held an iron grip over the daily lives of the people, and in many cases were quite ruthless. Moreover, except for this ruling elite and the small merchant class that served them and whatever their needs were, pretty much everyone else in first century Palestine was desperately poor, economically exploited, politically manipulated, and living on the edge of survival. So pretty much everyone that Jesus encounters on his way to Jerusalem is poor. But even among the poor, there was a hierarchy. And the poorest of the poor were the widows and children. Now, in North American society, children are often seen as a blessing, and while they are a responsibility, it's a joyful responsibility. Parents rejoice at the birth of children. And conversely, we're shocked and we're horrified as a culture when we hear of child abuse or when we learn of forced child labor. However, in poor, struggling families living on the edge of existence, especially in first century Palestine, children could often be seen as an economic burden. There was no birth control, and so families often had multiple children, and the birthing process was very life-threatening, and women often died in the process of childbirth. And many children, because they were so vulnerable, died in infancy. And if they did survive, often they were sent out to work or beg to help supply the family's needs. Children were often neglected or sent away, and some were even sacrificed to foreign gods. So to survive from childhood to adulthood in that society was not an easy thing to do. And it was not made any easier because children were seen often as a burden. So in this passage, when Jesus calls the children to him, he is reversing the social order of things. And that's why the disciples try to shoo the children away. And as the text says, they rebuke the children. They scold the children. Someone of Jesus' importance and stature normally did not have time or a place for children. And yet Jesus invites the children to come to him and makes what to his first listeners must have been almost incredible comment. He says, anyone who does not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. And he said, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these, to these children. Now, the kingdom of God was a shorthand way of Jesus referring to his message and his plan to reverse the social and political and spiritual order of his day. To say one should receive his message of the kingdom like a child was much like when he said, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. The one who rules must be the servant of all. In essence, Jesus is saying there's a new way of thinking and a new way of ordering our life that I'm talking about. That which has been considered of the lowest value, children, is now the standard by which we all must live. Jesus is saying if we are not willing to live in solidarity with the lowest of the low, we don't understand what he's about, and we have no business being a part of his message. Now I'll leave it to you to figure out how to interpret and apply this passage in your own context. But I share this analysis to show the power of critical Bible study. How many times have you heard this passage used to talk about the great reversal that Jesus is bringing in our society? Not very often. And that's because often people do not do the hard work of exegesis when they look at passages and really understand the passage in its own time, in its own context. You see, because so often we read a passage like this from our own cultural perspective, we miss the radical point that Jesus was trying to make. And that's why using the tools of critical Bible study are so important and so helpful. They open up for us a powerful message that the Bible brings that can challenge and transform our lives. I want you to have fun in your groups doing this work, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with in your groups as you work together. Do that hard work of exegesis and allow that message that Jesus or the Old Testament or other parts of the New Testament bring to have a sort of fresh life as you begin to see and hear it as the first listeners perceived it when they heard it for the first time. Have a great week.